Hello everybody, welcome back to More Sins of the Father. Kept you waiting, huh? Just wanted to say, sorry I didn't upload yesterday. I took a mental and physical health day. I was feeling rather ropey and very sorry for myself yesterday, so I decided to sort of take a day off and mostly spend it in bed and cry a bit and eat a big dinner and have an early night and just general self-care and stuff, which I think anyone can understand in the current climate and situation. I hope that everybody is finding ways to get through things and help themselves when they need to. It's okay to not be okay. That's something that I try to remind myself every now and then. But yeah, then you have to pick yourself up and carry on and get on with things. And no matter if you've got a sore throat and you're feeling down, still keep on trucking. So, but yeah, you didn't come here to hear me give advice on mental health and try and boost your morale a little bit. Well, maybe you did. I don't know. You came here to find out what exactly Martha and Parker found under the big red rug in Mr. Ford's study. So we're going to carry on from chapter 11. Chapter 11. Walsh took Amanda back into the lounge. The youngest Ford was in a state of understandable shock and had not spoken since she'd entered the study. Martha felt torn between wanting to comfort her and not being able to explain what she'd seen. The girl needed answers. She needed the truth about her father's untimely death, however awful it was. And it was beginning to look very bad indeed. Parker's pagan colleague arrived within 20 minutes of him calling her. Martha had been waiting in the study with the door firmly secured to prevent the other woman who was in the house from accidentally walking in on the difficult-to-explain scene while he went downstairs to covertly escort her up to the study. Martha had already made the decision that she'd talk to her aunt about the investigation when she knew more, but right now it was only another complication they did not need. One heart too many had already been shattered wide open by the shocking secret that Mr. Ford had kept. Soft rapping on the door let Martha know that the cavalry had arrived. She unlocked it from the inside and pulled it open, stepping out of the way. The woman that stepped through the door in front of Parker took her by surprise, not what she'd been expecting. It was probably more than a little bit ignorant, but when she heard the word pagan, Martha had not envisioned a tall, blonde, supermodel, beautiful woman wearing fitted jeans, heeled boots, a white and silver blouse that looked as though it came from a designer boutique store. The woman's hair had been piled up stylishly on top of her head, and her skin tone was pale, flawless save for two small beauty marks on her defined left cheekbone. Expressive green eyes scanned Martha from top to toe, and in the instant it took her to cross the threshold. And while she couldn't be certain, she thought that she saw her smirk. Securing the door once they were inside of the study, Martha muttered a small expression of fatigue that she hoped was barely audible. Parker heard it, however, and smiled down at her. For a moment she thought that he was going to reach out and touch her, but instead he seemed to stop himself from doing so, shoving his hands deep into his pockets as he walked over to the newcomer. The blonde pagan, allegedly known as Olivia, was standing next to the discarded red rug, looking down at the floor, her back to the exit and where Martha still stood, suddenly feeling strangely like a spare, discarded, very broken and rusted part. Well, Parker asked her, what do you think? Olivia glanced at him side on, retorting in a distinctively accented voice, which I cannot do. I'm not even going to attempt to do accents because I'm useless at them. I think you just dragged me away from what was looking to be a really interesting date, and now you owe me, big time. I appreciate it's your night off and that you didn't have to answer the phone, let alone come to my beck and call, he assured her, sounding very sincere. Now what about that? Well, that, my dear boy, that is a power circle. Yeah, we know that much, he responded, already getting a little more than a little bit exasperated by the curious back and forth that seemed to be occurring between the two of them. What does it mean? It means that someone was practicing magic in here. She paused as if waiting for a reaction that did not come, leaving her to simply shrug and start taking long-legged strides around the circumference of the crudely painted circle that had been drawn in the middle of Mr. Ford's private study. I can't be sure. My first guess would be that it's a summoning circle, used by practitioners to conjure up magical power. Only I've never seen it, or anything like it before. Do you think you can work it out? Parker asked earnestly. Maybe, she pondered slowly, striking green eyes roaming over the lines, the symbols, the incantations that meant absolutely nothing to the other two people in the room. Reaching forward with her hand as if she was feeling for something, the magical expert instantly nodded, like a theory within her own beautiful blonde head had been confirmed. Martha didn't read her to know that she too had likely met the same invisible barrier that she had done, trying to interact with it. Tilting her head in what appeared to be curiosity, Olivia then glanced between the two other bodies in the room and said, "Do you mind me asking who it was that found this?" "I did," Martha answered, slowly raising her hand as if she'd been called upon in class and was more than a little bit intimidated by the teacher. Both Parker and his colleague directed their attention at her, and she didn't know whether to be proud or nervous about the way that the other woman looked at her with appraisal in her eyes. But it emerged that she didn't need to worry, if she was complimented with what sounded like an utterly genuine, "Awesome. Nicely done." "Thanks, I guess." "What made you ask that?" Parker inquired, seemingly needing an explanation. Martha wondered if it was a strategy he'd developed, being an obvious null surrounded by people clearly as talented as Olivia and Walsh in their line of work. She had to admit that if it was sound. He was clearly interested in knowing how things ticked, even if he couldn't sense or experience the mystical anomalies for himself, not prepared to work in ignorance. Whoever blessed this was powerful enough to protect their work once they were done. You should never have found it. Not with the strength of the warding and the barrier spells. It's impressive. The man who we believe created it died a fortnight ago, Martha offered. Perhaps the warding's simply starting to wear off. No, Olivia shook her head, sounding amused. Not possible. Why not? It was Parker that asked this time. Because when a practitioner of magic dies, the energy that they put into the spell dies with them. The warding's still relatively fresh, and it's very potent. If the person who blessed this power circle had died, it'd be leaking magical energy all over the room, and I would not be standing here chatting to you over it. Martha frowned, mulling over what she'd said and the implications of it. There was energy in the room. Martha had sensed it. However, the pagan seemed to be suggesting that if the protective spell that had kept them both from touching the power circle had actually been compromised, then the fallout would be catastrophic. Swallowing hard, she asked the expert, "It's really that powerful?" "It's really that powerful." "There's magical energy leaking from it," Martha pointed out. "At least there was. The man who was killed in this room was not a magical practitioner. Even if he was, or if he did this, he shouldn't have that kind of power, and besides, he's very much dead." Olivia frowned, gazing back down at the circle for a long moment as if she was trying to read it again. Eventually she shrugged. "I suppose it's possible that the circle was created by the person who died. That would explain the bits of leakage. Whenever magic is used, whether it's spell casting, a blessing, or even conjuring, the practitioner has to call upon a certain amount of energy or power. A conscientious practitioner will only ever summon what they need or clean up after themselves. If they're sloppy, they might conjure too much and leave the excess for later, or a novice might not even know about that. Pagan's clear and utter disdain for anyone who didn't use magic carefully was palpable, and it was good enough to know that she took her craft very seriously. Everything that Martha was learning about the Empire team seemed legitimately professional, and she was once again grateful that there were people like their investigators in Amanda's proximity. It helped her believe that they could do that maybe there could be an outcome to all of this that wasn't totally awful for her sister. If left unused, Olivia continued, magical energy can become a problem. It simply hangs there, it stagnates, and eventually can become corrupted. Once it goes bad like that, it starts attracting things. Such as, asked Parker, intensely focused on what was being said. "Oh, all sorts of paranormal nasties," she shrugged. "Spirits, shadow creatures, astral critters, demons, the list goes on and on and on." "Demons?" Martha asked, swallowing a lump that suddenly formed in her throat. A mixture of cold, hard dread and understanding. "Sure, if the magic was powerful enough." Parker summarised what they'd been saying, asking Olivia, "So you think Mr. Ford was likely playing around with magic he wasn't powerful or versed enough to understand, and he left magical energy behind, attracting something that got in and killed him?" She nodded. "It's a possibility, yes." "But," he then asked, as if he were used to the way that she worked, "but if that's what happened, then whatever it was that the magic attracted would have had to have been powerful enough to bless the circle and then ward it after they were done. After they'd done away with the practitioner who cast it, therefore covering up their tracks. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the kind of things that are attracted to magic, corrupt magic, are simply scavengers. They're just not that smart. What could be? Martha inquired. You mentioned demons before. I was referring to lesser kinds of demons, the kind that predate on the already vulnerable rather than anything of true power. Like everything else I mentioned, they're opportunistic and cowardly parasites. It'd be much more likely they'd keep the practitioner, who would be essentially a source of their food, alive, so they can keep using it. It makes no sense to bite off the hand that feeds them. She had a point. Staring back down at the power circle, Olivia put her hands on her amply proportioned hips and shook her head, mostly to herself, it seemed, saying, "This would be easier if I knew exactly what the circle was for. As I said, I've never seen anything like it, except for the warding, which is the line of runes running around the very edge of the circle. I just don't know what it was for," Parker said. "We confirmed that somebody, possibly the victim, was performing magic in this room, and that a different or powerful enough something warded the circle after killing him." Somewhat reluctantly, she nodded. "Someone created this. I don't think they're the same person that warded it. The magic fills off." "That's something, at least." "Yeah, it is," she half-heartedly agreed, still staring down at the power circle. To Martha's eyes, she appeared to be as much sad as she was frustrated that she didn't instantly have all the answers, her shoulders ever so slightly slumping. Nevertheless, she appeared to quickly shrug it off, confidently addressing Parker. "Do me a favour. Take some pictures of it and email them to me so I can look into it more at home. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not recreate it by drawing it or copying out any of the runes on it. Until we know what we're dealing with, I don't want any of that magic getting free of the warding that's keeping it sealed." Parker all but rolled his eyes. Yeah, I know the drill." "Somebody didn't want this to be found," Olivia ignored the clear sarcasm. Guess that meant she was no longer in the mood to be playful. "Be very careful here. Cover it back up once you're done and don't do anything else with it. Not yet. Promise me. Promise." "Good." The blonde woman sounded curiously relieved. "Is it not safe?" Martha couldn't help but ask. "My family live here." There was a seriousness in Olivia's tone and her eyes that if she was certain about anything, Martha didn't want to challenge. Like the young psychic that was dating her sister, Empire's resident pagan was more than powerful and therefore a hell of a lot more dangerous than she physically appeared. Wholly intimidating in more than one way. "Once I know what the deal is, I'll work out how to get through the warding and handle the energy inside. Nobody will get hurt as long as they do as I say and they leave it the hell alone." Martha nodded. "Okay, I'll make sure of it." "I'm sure you will," the other woman retorted before turning back to her colleague. "I'm going to get out of here. If you find anything more, let me know immediately. Otherwise, I'll see you at noon." He nodded in response, a genuine softness appearing in his eyes as they met hers for the very first time since they entered the room together. "Thanks, Liv," he spoke to her very softly. "I really appreciate you going out of your way like this. It means a lot." "Of course you do." She loftily batted the compliment away with her right hand as if it annoyed her. "Who else would drop their plans in the middle of the night to come rushing at your beck and call?" Parker genuinely smiled at that one. "I owe you one." She nodded with a smirk of her own. "A very big one, preferably one with sparkles that catch the light. I'll show myself out." Coming back around the strange power circle, she headed towards where Martha was still standing by the door. The differences in their heights made the other woman feel much shorter than she truly was, but that might have had a little bit to do with the pagan's high levels of self-confidence. It had been a long time since Martha had been around somebody who had Olivia's assuredness that wasn't male, and she couldn't help but feel a little bit disconcerted. Plus, there were clearly something underlying going on involving the personal dynamics of the three particular individuals in the room, something that Martha was not privy to. She didn't know and couldn't begin to guess what sort of relationship her former boyfriend had with the leggy, beautiful blonde he worked with, but they were at least close friends. And that meant something, or everything. Olivia paused as she reached the door, and Martha acknowledged her, and she smiled. It seemed genuine, and there was something in her impressive green eyes that Martha couldn't quite put her finger on. Not animosity exactly, something that felt personal, even though they'd never met before, and it was hard for her to establish what this impressive woman knew about her, let alone what her opinion might be. Her words, when she eventually spoke, were not in the least bit confrontational, glibly commenting, "Nice to see you're as remarkable as everyone's always claimed, Martha Ford. Have to admit, it's finally good to be able to put a face to the name." "It's Valentine, actually," Martha instinctively corrected her. "Not Ford. I started using my mother's name a decade ago." "I'll remember that," Olivia smiled, that strange smile again. "And I'll be sure to put in a good word with my father. You've done some great work here tonight. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear all about it in preparation for when he finally gets to meet you himself." Having no idea who her father might be, but not wanting to seem combative, Martha simply offered, "Thanks. It was good meeting you too, Olivia. We really appreciate the help." "Much obliged," she wished. She winked and was out of the door, gone. Chapter 12. As the door shut, Michael Parker released a breath he hadn't realised he'd been holding. Calling Olivia in on Amanda's investigation was risky at best, but the moment he'd seen what had been hiding underneath Mr. Ford's gauche, oversized red rug, he'd known that he no longer had the option to be selfish. She was the best at what she did for a reason, and an input was needed, whether her presence was going to be painfully awkward or not. That she'd been out on a date when he'd called her was just the right kind of twist of fate he should have expected. Irony sure lived to kick him in the backside when it wanted to make him feel like an absolute idiot about the stupidest mistakes he'd ever made in his life. Nevertheless, she'd listened to his plea and rushed over to the Ford residence to appraise the strange power circle. The whole thing had gone about as expected, knowing the two women who'd played such big roles in his personal life as well as he did. His only regret was that they didn't have more answers as to what happened in there the night that Mr. Ford died. He wanted to give Amanda something concrete to go forward with. The poor girl had been so shaken by the revelation that her father might not have been as good of a man as she believed. It was not fair that she suffered so much, while that bastard didn't even have the good graces to still be around to answer for his misdemeanours. She deserved so much better than his poisoned legacy. Martha had her arms crossed in front of her chest again as she stepped further into the room. Part of her wanted to wrap his arms around her so badly, but it was not his place to do that anymore, and he wasn't even sure if she'd accept physical comfort from anyone, let alone him, not after what she'd been through. Damn, he still couldn't get his head around all of that. It was horrific and gut-wrenching, and if he didn't keep putting it into the back of his mind, he wouldn't be able to do his job, and he needed to work. Setting about doing what Olivia had instructed, he went to his attaché case and pulled out a small digital camera. He'd photographed the evidence so that they could cover it back up and secure the room until they could figure out what it was and how they could neutralise it. He'd seen his colleague in action plenty of times and was confident that whatever it was, she'd be able to handle it. She was simply that good at what she did. Carefully and efficiently, he captured a few images of the circle in its entirety, and then about 100 pictures of the individual symbols and rooms. It was painstaking work. By the time he was satisfied he'd got enough images, he was thoroughly sick of the sight of the thing. Good thing that he couldn't feel it too. Turning his attention to Martha, who'd been standing there simply watching him work again, he asked, "Can you give me a hand getting this thing covered back up?" She blinked as if she'd been in her own little world before nodding absently. Yes, of course, good idea." It was an easier task, covering the circle back up, than it had been trying to get it off the floor, with Martha taking more than her fair share of the red rug's considerable weight. He'd been impressed by her physical strength earlier on, though he could easily see that she'd been keeping herself in great shape since she recovered from her ordeal. Now her physical toughness seemed to more than match her mental fortitude. He couldn't help but admire her even more. Pathetic, he knew. The rug firmly back in place, he returned the camera to his case and shut it tight. What a night. Checking his watch, he realised that it was far from over. They should probably go and check on Amanda. Turning to look at Martha, he was disheartened to see that she was standing in front of where the circle was located on the floor, staring down at the rug as if she could see right through it, and she couldn't prise her gaze from its twisted presence. He called her name softly, unable to bear seeing her look so haunted, but not wanting to intrude on her personal space, no matter how badly he wanted to. She sighed deeply, stating, hate this house. Yeah, I get that. Taking a deep, shaking breath, she seemed to mentally shake herself back out of her melancholy, running a hand through her dark, curling hair, much shorter than it had been all those years ago. It suited her, made her look more like the woman she'd become. I think I want to be with my sister now, she said, crossing the room, barely looking at him. The door was unlocked and opened. She disappeared through it without even a backwards glance, leaving him alone in the room that he didn't feel inclined to stay inside any longer than she did. Gathering up his case, he followed, turning the lights off and locking the door behind him, bringing the key. He left the case by the wall at the top of the stairs before joining the others in the lounge. Amanda was curled up on the sofa. Martha had joined her, but the two of them were not touching, let alone holding each other as one might expect if you did not know that both sisters were powerful mystics in their own right, and that physical contact when emotions were running high could have consequences that were utterly devastating to behold. Walsh was standing by the balcony door, a mirror image to how the one in the study might have appeared before the fateful night had been broken. Rather than disturbing the sisters, Parker crossed the room and went to his young friend, who nodded in greeting as he joined them. How's she holding up? He asked Walsh, because it seemed the most important thing to ask. Not good. The younger man shook his head, his voice muted to a low whisper. This has taken a lot out of her. Not surprising. Losing her father, having Gail in such a state, and then seeing that. He cursed under his breath. I can't imagine what she's going through right now. Poor girl. It's more than that. She thinks she's seen it before, the circle. She claims that she dreamt it a few years ago and drew it out and showed it to her father. Guy took it from her, told her not to ever worry about it again. Bad dream, nothing more. There was clear anger underpinning his voice as he added, yeah, well, that bad dream just became a reality, and his daughter is the one having to live it. Parker didn't have any words to respond to all of that, rather than a colourful string of expletives that he didn't want to verbalise. He'd already been swearing far too much for one evening. This whole mess just got worse and worse. Where would it end? Walsh had somehow just about managed to keep his head where it needed to be, given that it was Amanda who'd been hurt, was a remarkable thing. Bluntly, he pointed out, he must have researched and used it. For what? She doesn't have a clue. Yet now she's feeling like this is her fault. She didn't know what it was, let alone that he would use it. He was her dad. She trusted him. Yeah, Parker mused, trying to get his head around it all. After a few minutes of thought-filled silence, the young psychic asked, what did the princess have to say about it all? Olivia's not sure what it was used for either, Parker relayed, trying not to rise to the nickname utilised. She's had me take photos of it so she can do some research, warned us to cover it back up and not mess with it. Protective warding on it's powerful. She's not convinced that Amanda's father drew the thing, let alone warded and blessed it. She's right. Walsh nodded. Mr. Ford was a null in every sense of the word. He didn't have it in him. Quite frankly, I'm shocked he even tried that crap at all. It's never going to end well for him. It was so unusual for the young psychic to agree with their pagan expert that Parker took note of what he said, on the provision that it was most likely the reality of things. On their own, the pair of them were rarely wrong. Together, sharing the same opinion, there had to be something to their theory. He'd take their advice on board. What are you going to do now? The younger man asked. I need to go back to the office, get the pictures to Olivia and process everything. You said that Mr. Ford must have researched the image that Amanda gave to him. If that's the case, there must be a paper trail. He'd have kept notes, used books. He glanced over his shoulder at the two young women who were sitting on the sofa, seemingly finding comfort in each other's presence. He decided, but I won't do anything with that tonight. God, she's been through so much. I'll have to come back tomorrow. And I'm sure she'll be happy to help you with anything you need assistance with. Walsh nodded, before leaving what felt like a deliberate pause. How are the two of you getting along, anyway? What are you... Parker momentarily frowned with confusion before it clicked into place. I wasn't talking about her. Walsh smirked. Of course you weren't. She's here. We talked. It's not awkward. Can we just drop it? For now, the younger man conceded, leaving plenty enough in his tone to firmly state that the conversation was far from over. He could be so relentless sometimes, he really could. Coupled with his near Yoda-like mind-reading skills, it made for more annoying moments that Parker could recall. That he currently seemed to be more concerned about Amanda than poking fun was a break that was pretty far from fortunate. Nothing about the mess they'd found themselves in was lucky. It was far too personal all around. Knowing that he needed to get back to the office, Parker gave his closest friend a nod in the direction of the sofas, seeking moral support in disrupting Amanda and her sister. He didn't want to simply slip away without assuring her that everything was going to be taken care of. It wouldn't have been professional, and he had to keep his head clear that he was there because she hired him to find out what had happened to her father. Nothing else mattered. "Are you all right, Amanda?" he asked as he got into her eye line. "Not really." The younger sister shook her head, almost in a daze. "Of course not. Stupid question." "I need to get back to the office," he stated, deciding to simply relay as much information as he needed to. "If you don't mind, I'd like to come back tomorrow as soon as I have some news back from Olivia so I can take another look through your dad's papers." Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes and cheeks with the back of her hand. "Whatever you need to do, just do it. It'll be fine." "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Thank you, Parker," she smiled mutedly. "I'm glad you're here." With a nod, he turned and left the lounge, deciding not to hang around to find out if the woman that had been sitting beside her was going to say goodnight to him. It was unlike him to let the jovial prodding of his friend affect him, but he was acutely aware of the perceptive brown eyes that had been watching him as he wrapped things up. It was ridiculous. He wasn't 18 years old anymore, and there were much more important things at stake than his personal life. Martha Ford, Valentine as she now called herself, would still be there tomorrow, and he could see her again. He foolishly hoped. Okay, so 2 chapters. Quite a bit in that to process. So what was under the red rug? Well, it appears to be some kind of summoning circle, magic, only the magical expert from Empire doesn't even really know what it is, and there may have been a little bit of personal tension going on there too. Yes, Mr. Parker is, I'm not going to say too much because I'm trying to be so careful and not overshare things, but I think that I'll let the way that he's spoken about Martha stand for himself. It's pretty clear there's some lingering feelings there. So yes, thank you very much for listening to me. I just knocked my microphone, I'm so sorry. Ramble again. There is much more to come. Really interesting to see how this all folds out and what they can come up with and how they're gonna deal with it all. It's a lot of information, a lot to take in. So I hope that everybody is taking care. I hope you have a lovely day. I hope to speak to you tomorrow. No promises, just taking each day as it comes at the moment, and I think that's the best that everybody can do given the situation. But I will try to be here with you so we can carry on the story and find out what happens. I've been reluctant to say too much about and to plug it, but you can buy the book. The book is on Amazon at the moment. It's on Kindle, and you can buy this paperback version of it on Amazon. I'll put the links in the description. And you can also follow me on various social media things. On Twitter, is Lucie J. Mansell, is my author Twitter, and I have an author Facebook as well that's also Lucie J. Mansell. I'm on Instagram as well, but I don't really use that much. And I also have a website, luciejmansell.com, where I have been uploading these videos, and I blog very occasionally, and I'm slowly building that up. So yeah, you can find me in all of those places. And back here tomorrow, hopefully, for more Sins of the Father. So goodbye. Thank you for watching.